Tonight's story, which you are about to hear, began after a revenge that, in the words of the subject, ended with a passion for the taste of human flesh, that feeling of dominance and control, obtained after taking the life of another. This is what motivated Joe Roy Metheny, a man with morbid obesity, a piercing gaze, and thick features, with an intimidating smile, standing 1.85 meters and over 150 kilograms. He said in his statement, "The next time you go down the road and find a burger stand you've never seen, think carefully about this story, as you never know who you might be eating." The following criminal story stars Joe Roy Metheny, who was born on March 2, 1955, in Baltimore, United States, into a family of 6 children, where most of the time they were neglected by their parents, as his father had an alcohol problem and spent the money on drink, so his mother had to work hard to support them. At the age of 6 years, his father died in a car accident, and the children were left to the care of their mother, who took charge of the family, neglecting them even more as to cover the financial burden. She had to work double shifts to earn more income as a waitress and food truck driver. He and his siblings were often sent to live with other families in the foster care system, which allows children in danger of abuse and neglect to live in a safe place temporarily until it is determined they can return to their biological parents, or in some cases the family in charge of their care wishes to adopt them. Joe took refuge in food and began eating uncontrollably, which caused a serious problem with obesity that balanced out as he grew up. At 18 years, he claimed he joined the U.S. Army in the year 1973 and served in Germany. During his service, Joe became addicted to drugs, noticeably changing his behavior, marking the start of many problems to come. His mother began to notice the decline of her son, who grew distant from the family more and more. Joe was known by his friends as Tiny, as he stood 1.85 meters and was big-boned. His addiction led him to follow his father's example, and he began to frequent bars and taverns, living with homeless people who set up camps in South Baltimore. That is where he met an unnamed woman with whom he would have his first child. After learning he would be a father, he got a job at a company where everything was going well, as he was considered an intelligent, well-spoken, and very polite person. What few knew was that he had an addiction. It all began on the night of July 1994. Joe, who worked driving a forklift at the pallet company which dealt in the sale and manufacture of pallets, that night he worked late and stayed for overtime. When his shift ended, he headed home as he usually did. Opening the door, he turned on the light and noticed the house was empty. Neither his 6-year-old son nor his wife were there. She had taken everything and left him. Seeing the silence in his home, he was enraged, not so much by the loss of his wife, who was a drug addict he fought with often, but because he loved his son. In fact, he considered his wife trash, who used all kinds of substances. After a few days, he began searching everywhere for them without success. It wasn't until 6 months later that some people told him they had seen her across town with a man who forced her to offer intimate services for drugs without caring that the child was present. A few days later, his ex-wife and her partner were arrested for possession of illicit drugs, and they took the minor for child abuse and neglect. Joe couldn't do anything to get his son back, so he was filled with hate toward his wife and her partner. He felt they had to pay for what they had done, taking his son away. So he began searching for both of them, as he learned they were free. The only penalty was losing the child. He found that they were living under a bridge with drug addicts and homeless people, so one day he decided to go find them, but unfortunately he could not find them. However, he found 2 people lying on an old, dirty mattress, and seeing them reminded him of why his son was taken away, and he exploded in rage, killing them with an axe. After the deed, he hid them in the bushes and kept searching the nearby areas. At the site, that same night, the search continued at nearby bridges. Was then that he noticed near where he had committed the murders, 2 women were under the bridge. So he approached them and tried to get information about his wife's whereabouts. One of them walked a few meters. That was where he interrogated her for information, but under the influence of illicit drugs, she was unresponsive. Not getting what he wanted, he began to beat her, then abused her and finally killed her. Once he had finished with her, he dragged her to some bushes and left her. Then he went for the next woman and did the same. But she claimed not to know who he was talking about, so he murdered her. But as he was about to throw her into the bushes with the other girl, he saw an old man fishing by the Patapsco River watching him. So he took a steel pipe from the trash and ran toward him. When the old man tried to react, he received a series of blows that ended his life. Once he came to his senses and realized what he had done, he dragged the bodies to the side of the Patapsco River in Baltimore, Maryland, and tried to hide them with stones. Then he washed in the river and tried to clean the area as much as possible to leave no trace. That night he said he committed 5 murders in approximately 7 hours. While searching for his wife, one night in 1994, he lured 39-year-old Katie and Magaziner with a criminal record to the factory. They were consuming illicit drugs, and after she refused to be intimate with him, he choked her until she died. After the deed, he dug a shallow grave in a small forest behind the factory, where she stayed unnoticed for 6 months until Joseph removed her head and threw it away. The body remained there for years. On August 2nd, 1995, the bodies of the homeless men were found and identified as Randall Brewer and Randy Paker. Weeks later, Joe Metheny was accused of both murders, as that night some people saw an overweight man hanging around the bridges, so the investigation led to the whereabouts of suspect Joe Metheny. Bail was denied and he had to spend 18 months in the Baltimore jail waiting for trial. However, there was no evidence against him. After the trial lasted 1 week, he was released due to lack of evidence, as it was found that the killer was another homeless man. Upon being released, he went to his old job to ask his boss for his position back at the pallet company in Baltimore. His boss agreed, since he was a good worker. But not only that, he also granted Joseph's request to stay in a small trailer on the property if he watched the site, as he had nowhere else to go. So he gave him the keys to the place, trusting his goodwill. But what he didn't know was that Joe had other plans, as the company was on a dead-end street, isolated from the road, a perfect place to act out his fantasies. In November 1996, he lured Kimberly Lynn Spicer, whom he stabbed to death. After she resisted him, he buried her body inside the factory. It was at this precise moment that he cut up her flesh and put it in some containers to then place them in the refrigerator. That week, he set up a small hamburger stand where he claimed he mixed pork and beef with human flesh, and no one could tell the difference in taste. He even mentioned that many people told him that his burgers were the best they had ever tasted. He added, things went well until he ran out of special meat. On December 8, 1996, he took his new victim, named Rita Kemper. He said they shared drugs for a long time inside the trailer until he tried to rip off her clothes. She refused to be intimate with him and in desperation began to scream, but there was no one who could help her, so in a distraction, she ran from the trailer. Joe went after her and dragged her back. He told her he would kill her, so as best she could, she escaped again. She ran to a wire fence which had barbed wire on top, but that did not stop her from jumping. She ran to the road and a man in a truck stopped when he saw her. He took her to a nearby gas station, where they called the police. Joe gathered his clothes, knowing they would soon come for him, but leaving the trailer, an officer was already there. He told him to get on the ground, so they took him in and began to interrogate him. As expected, he denied all the charges for which he had been arrested. One was that the girl mentioned he said she would end up like the others, buried in the woods. He immediately denied those words, adding that it was all with her consent. So they let him go. Seeing that the police might go to the site to verify that everything was fine, Joe asked a friend to help him dig up the body of Kimberly, which was still inside the factory. It was then that on December 15, 1996, his friend reported him to the authorities, saying that Joe asked him to help move the body of a woman buried next to the trailer. Going to the site, the police arrested him again and even arrested the owner for alleged complicity. Then they asked Joe to tell them where he had buried Kimberly. He gave the exact location and they found the body of a woman. So that same day, once they started the interrogations, he confessed to other crimes, including the previous victim, Katie, and Magaziner, and led the police to the place where he had buried her. So they found a shallow grave where he had buried her remains. Much of the skull was missing, but the victim was identified through her dental records. They clearly belonged to Katie, but days later, he claimed to be a serial killer and had committed 13 murders. He said he threw the bodies into the Patapsco River and they were never found. He even claimed that most of his victims were cut into pieces and that he kept the meat to eat later. Later, he had the idea to open a food stand to sell human meat mixed with animal meat. First, the statements were shocking, but as days passed, they began to question the truth of his words as he was interrogated daily in a small room, since the investigators wanted to clarify and close many unsolved cases, trying to find out what he had done. He was taken from jail daily and moved from place to place to tell investigators where he threw the bodies. Thus, passed 1 month and they never found any victims Joe claimed to have killed. At this point, detectives did not know if Joe was telling the truth or just delusional, since there was great instability in what he said. It sounded too fantastical to be true. The main problem investigating Joe Metheny was that he was also a liar and could create stories while telling everything. In 1997, he was tried for the Rita Kemper case, the last victim who escaped, and was sentenced to 50 years for attempting to kidnap and abuse her. In 1998, he pleaded guilty to killing Katie Magaziner, and on July 14, 2000, was sentenced to life sentence without parole. No one knew if Joe lied for fun or if his mind was so unstable that he confessed to past crimes. No evidence was ever found of the crimes he allegedly committed, nor was it proven if he really opened his meat stand to sell the bodies of his victims. The only murders that could be proven were two. His mental instability was notable, which led him to make false confessions. Finally, he mentioned the words "I'm sorry" will never leave my mouth because they'd be a lie. I am more than willing to give my life for what I've done, so God can judge me and can send me to hell for eternity. I simply enjoyed it. On Saturday, August 5, 2017, he was mysteriously found dead in his cell at around 3 in the afternoon at the Western Correctional Institution in Cumberland, Maryland, of unknown causes at the age of 62 years. This case is a clear example that not everything killers confess is true, as many tend to claim crimes they didn't commit just for the sake of being important and recognized. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. I hope you've had an excellent night and that you continue to enjoy another day. This is